Preface of the Ascent of Mount St. Elias, Alaska. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Phil Schempf. The Ascent of Mount St. Elias, Alaska, by Filippo De Filippi. Translated by Linda White Mazzini Villari. In the acute and subtle criticism of modern alpinism with which Mr. Mummery concludes the narrative of his own expeditions, he says that the true alpinist is the man who attempts new ascents. This opinion is undoubtedly shared by those climbers who turn eagerly to the few alpine peaks forgotten or neglected by earlier explorers, and are conquering them in such rapid succession that soon no virgin summit will be left in that range. But in fact, the conquest of the Alps was virtually accomplished many years ago. The giant peaks were already won, and ambitious climbers, including several of those who had taken part in the great battle, then left home to seek new perils and fresh victories farther afield. Thus began a series of alpine expeditions to remote and inhospitable regions, little known or totally unexplored. Regions where technical experience of mountain work had to be supplemented by a wide and varied knowledge and power of resource in order to successfully cope with the obstacles and dangers of exploration. Accordingly, the great mountain explorations of recent times have been evolved from traditional mountaineering and, more directly, from the conquest of the Alps. To this day the Alps remain the best teachers of the art. Theirs is the only school where it may be learnt and practiced. The experience gained there has made it possible to establish in every detail a technique of climbing, and the comprehensive knowledge thus acquired of difficulties and dangers, and of the best means of overcoming them, has emboldened the alpinist to attempt the conquest of the mightiest ranges of the world. His Royal Highness, the Duke of the Abruzzi, has joined the ranks of this small band of explorers by making the expedition described in the present work. The region dominated by Mount St. Elias offers such marked characteristics and unusual conditions of life and activity that a thorough knowledge of these is required in order to grasp the real nature of the expedition. If the winning of St. Elias only meant the ascent of the terminal cone, made in one day from the Russell Col, it might be compared with many of the easier climbs in our own Alps. The reply given by one of our guides on his return exactly defines it. Just like the Breithorn, only much higher. Nor, strictly considered, would the altitude of the mountain, 18,000 feet, render its ascent an exceptional undertaking, seeing that summits ranging to over 23,000 feet above the sea have already been conquered. But when we take into account the entire route traversed by the expedition from the landing place on the west coast of Yakutat Bay to the top of the peak, the true nature of the enterprise becomes apparent. The exceptional difficulty consists precisely in having to cross a zone of ice and snow of far greater extent than any to be found in other mountain groups. The Alaska coast ranges are in the identical condition that prevailed in the Alps during the Ice Age. Their glaciers descend to the sea, while their snow line is as low as 2,500 feet above the sea level. Hence the ascent of St. Elias differs fundamentally from any of the great climbs on record. Mr. J. C. Russell, who was the chief explorer of the region traversed by His Royal Highness's caravan, has published some interesting remarks on the nature of the work. He maintains that an approximate idea may be formed of the obstacles to be overcome in various ascents by comparing the height and distance of the summit beyond the farthest point where fuel can be found. Now, since the limit of vegetation descends as we approach the poles, the proportionate difficulty of a given ascent might be calculated according to the latitude of the mountain, with due regard, of course, to its height. Considering some of the highest peaks of the American continent from this point of view, Mr. Russell observes that on Chimborazo in the equatorial Andes the last fire is lighted above 14,000 feet above the sea, and only 5,900 feet have to be climbed to reach the summit, 19,500 feet. The great volcanoes of Mexico rise to an altitude of about 17,000 feet above the sea, while the limit of forest vegetation is over 13,000 feet. On Mount Whitney, 14,000 feet, the highest peak of the Sierra Nevada, trees are found up to the level of nearly 11,000 feet. The snow zone in all these instances
Sample complete. Ready to continue?